just slashed half of its staff. And this is a storied Big Apple tabloid that back in the 1970s New York fiscal crisis ran that famous headline, Ford to City, drop dead. Now people think the Daily News might be in danger of dropping dead with these huge cuts imposed by the Chicago-based Tronc company, which is the worst corporate name ever. Joining me now from New York is Chelsia Rose Marcius. She was a reporter for the Daily News who was laid off in this massive amount of cutbacks. And I want to start by just asking you how you're doing and what it was like to get this shocking news.
Well, Howie, thank you so much for having me. We do appreciate the coverage of this. I'm hanging in there. My colleagues are hanging in there. It was devastating news on Monday to receive our pink slips, essentially. We were ushered into the newsroom at 9 a.m. and we were told at 9 a.m. that we would be getting an email shortly to meet in small groups and essentially learn our fate, although that wasn't verbatim. And we waited in the newsroom for at least an hour and a half before we were ushered into a conference room where the other 12 so employees with me were told that our positions were being eliminated. And it was heartbreaking. And the way that Tronc handled this, for me and for many of my colleagues at the Daily News, it was not done correctly in our estimation, in our minds.
Well, you know, nobody likes to go through this. It's awful. Of course, newspapers are under a lot of pressure. But talk a little bit about the Daily News and its importance to the community, to the local coverage in New York, as well as the feeling among the staff, because you've all, worked together very hard.
Yeah, like you said, Howie, nobody's oblivious here to the state of newspapers. We all know the situation. We all know the struggles of newspapers. This isn't the first layoff. But we believe in the work that we do. We believe it's important to the communities. We are in the outer boroughs. We are covering various parts of the Bronx and Queens and Staten Island that just don't get the same kind of coverage from other places. I mean, it's the New York Post and the New York Daily News that essentially do that. And if you cut the New York Daily News, which is really, truly known for its outer borough coverage, even more than the Post, it's just, I mean, how are those communities going to get covered in the exact same way? I just don't see how they're going to do that.
And I understand the revenue pressure and all of that, and lots of newspapers have had layoffs, but I don't understand, you cut half the staff, I don't see how that's a winning business strategy for the future, because now there'll be a lot fewer reporters doing this kind of work. And even there's a logo, as you know, in the Daily News is of a camera, because it used to bill itself as New York's picture newspaper, except now all the photographers have been laid off.
Now all our photographers are gone, and the photographers are so integral to what the Daily News does, as well as the field reporters. I was a street reporter for the Daily News, and we were chasing breaking news every day. And the irony of this whole thing, Howie, is that Tronc says they want to focus on breaking news. Well, how do you focus on breaking news if you cut all of your people that are out there on the streets chasing these stories as they happen?
It's utterly,
I mean, we broke a ton of stories. It's just not going to work, again, in my estimation.
It's utterly contradictory. Now, I think nationally the news turned off some people, at least on the conservative side, with all of those mocking covers about Donald Trump, showing him to be a clown and all kinds of things. I mean, I guess they're kind of like front page editorials. But for people outside of the 5 boroughs, they should know that the great strength of the Daily News and the Post as well has been, covering where the people live, not necessarily in the Upper East Side, but in Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, and Staten Island. Does this suggest that local news, if it can't make it in New York, can local news make it anywhere?
It's a really good question, Howie, and I fear that the answer might be no, and that scares me, because whether you are more left or more right, I think this news needs to be told. We need to have journalists out there covering these small stories, because you know what? If you don't cover the small stuff, you don't realize what's big. And our colleagues at the Post and the Daily News, and the other reporters out there at various other newspapers that have been cut, they are so important to that democratic process. You need to have them, because you will miss the big stories if you don't cover the small ones.
That's a really honest answer, because I want the answer to be no. Of course, local news will survive and in other forms, but it is a very tough environment out there, as you have found out firsthand. Chelsia Rose Marcius, thank you so much for joining us in what I know has been a very tough week.
Thank you so much, Howie. Appreciate it.
Thanks again.